It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Is Donald Trump going to try and blow Iran off the face of the earth? Or is it, as Marco Rubio said the very same day, time to give peace a chance? Rubio stated the American principal war demand that everything should return to the status quo ante that existed before the United States began the war. And who was the he? And it was a he, a very tall he, who made himself $125 million overnight without knowing that Axios moments later were going to tell the world that for the seventh time a peace deal between Iran and the United States was imminent. And this could be the last night of Keir Starmer's premiership. It's all coming up on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. Well, let's get the unimportant stuff out of the way right now. It is election day in Britain, in Scotland, in Wales, in England tomorrow. And it may very well be that the wipeout of Labour councillors is so extreme that Keir Starmer will not survive the shock. It was hitherto believed that because of the lack of a credible alternative, I mean, how credible do you have to be an alternative to Keir Starmer, that they might wait a month or two. But as the predictions of Labour losses rise, people are now limbering up for what seems an inevitable leadership contest. It was thought Labour would lose 1,000 councillors. Then it was thought they'd lose 1,700 councillors. Now it's believed that of their 5,000 councillors, they may very well be about to lose more than 2,000 of them. We must live in hope, and the British people, as an overwhelming majority, are desperately keen to see the back of the worst Prime Minister ever seen. speaking about the back of Keir Starmer, we continue to be the only broadcasting outfit covering the burning of his back door. And there'll be more, I'm sure, of that in the course of the evening, particularly when I talk to the one and only Kit Klarenberg, who takes, like me, a keen view of British intelligence matters and the politics that flow from them. But going on to the more important stuff, we'll learn from Professor Seyed Marandi in just a few minutes' time whether Axios, at the seventh time of asking, has got it right this time. Axios and its Israeli chief reporter Barak Ravid have 7 times predicted, just as the markets were about to be influenced, that the war between the United States and Israel and Iran was about to come to a negotiated end. Is it 7th time lucky, is the question I'll be asking. Well, it's difficult to know, because when you're dealing with a certifiable lunatic in the White House like Donald J. Trump, one cannot know if the last announcement he made will perhaps be diametrically opposite to the one he's about to make when he sits down. Let's review the last few days. And thank you, by the way, for the record audience number on the last 2 shows. 13.6 million people viewed all or part of the mother of all talk shows. Let's review what's happened since. Well, Donald Trump gathered a group of school children, I know, it's dodgy these days, into the Oval Office. And he frightened them, terrified them. I know, these people can't stop frightening children, one way or another. He told them that Iran had been just 2 weeks away from killing them. That's right. That's what he said to children. Those very children. Iran was going to kill them. In 2 weeks' time would have had the means to and the intention of killing them. I don't know, if I was one of their parents, well, I wouldn't have let them go to see Donald Trump in the Oval Office either. But the parents of those children will have to deal with the fact that the President of the United States deliberately, as a matter of propaganda, political abuse of the office that he holds, told those children they were 2 weeks away from death and that therefore he had to act against Iran. Now leave aside the propriety of frightening children for political purposes. Leave aside the fact that this is a monumental lie, even according to the United States' own governmental machine itself. Leave aside it directly contradicts Tulsi Gabbard, the National Security Advisor to the President, who said the precise opposite. Leave aside the fact that nobody other than the fevered imagination of Donald Trump believes that Iran was 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon and the intention of murdering all those children. He was projecting, of course, because the murderer of school children is him. The murderer of the school children who were wiped out, eviscerated into particles of DNA on the very first day of the war, 28th of February, launched by him. Those children will never be forgotten, Donald, and you should go to your grave knowing that the Almighty, that you may or may not believe in, won't forget either. The killer of school children, women and men, is the very same government, epitomized by Marco Rubio, who asked the United Nations for help today. Imagine. The United States, which doesn't pay its United Nations bills, the United States, which excoriates the UN on every available opportunity, the United States, which vetoes every move for peace in the Middle East and elsewhere, the United States, which hates the United Nations, appealed to them for help today. Give peace a chance, said Marco Rubio. John Lennon must be turning in his grave. Give peace a chance. Please ask the Iranians not to blow up any more ships. it's time to give peace a chance. Is it that America we're dealing with, or is it the America of Donald Trump who disappeared through a door telling a selfie seeker just minutes ago, we're going to get them. We're going to get, who they're going to get, who knows? Could be anybody with Donald Trump these days. Is it the America that now states as its singular war aim the return of the status quo ante, of the situation that existed before the war began? No question of Iran limiting its ballistic missile capabilities, no question of Iran cutting its relations with its ideological and theological hinterland in the region, in the crescent of crisis that I wrote about in 1984. No question of Iran doing anything other than they had already agreed to do with President Barack Obama. That is to say, limit the level of their nuclear enrichment, give an undertaking that they have no intention between 12 to 15 years from now of building a nuclear weapon. No question of any of these things. Only one demand: that the Straits of Hormuz returns to being exactly what it was before Donald Trump killed all those schoolgirls. Just contemplate the madness of that. Is it the United States that told the people of Iran that there was going to be an Operation Freedom, that they were stepping up their efforts to free the people of Iran? Is it that United States that is now saying, let's give peace a chance? Let's ask the United Nations to see if we can see peace given a chance? Is it the United States that told the people of the world just yesterday in the repugnant shape of Lindsey Graham, the senator from Carolina, who said, we have millions of boots on the ground, we just haven't given them weapons? Is that the United States that we are talking about here? Seyed Marandi will no doubt give his expert view. My view, for what it's worth, and I've been wrong before, I was wrong, I think, 1978 or 79. I have been wrong before. My view is that Donald Trump is desperate to get out of this war for a variety of reasons, principally the economic damage downstream in Europe and in some of his favorite Asian countries. But it could be, as Brian Berletic would definitely say, that this is all just another ruse and that they are intent on launching another massive attack against Iran before Trump goes to China. It definitely will be embarrassing for Trump to have set Iran on fire, to have embarked upon another attempt to wipe out Iranian civilization. It will be difficult for Trump to sit with President Xi Jinping in China to make some grand bargain on world affairs, world economic affairs, if not political affairs, because China is right behind Iran. That's why the Iranian Foreign Minister Aragchi is right this minute in Beijing. The Chinese have stepped up to the plate on Iran. They are not going to allow the United States to destroy the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that means if it's going to happen, it's going to happen very, very quickly indeed. We'll discuss this through the course of the show. I'm in Moscow for the last time on this trip. I'm in Moscow today, where preparations are heavily involved in the Victory Day celebration for May 9th. And I wanted to turn to this subject for one reason only, because I've just read in the Financial Times that President Putin is hiding in a bunker most of the time, that he has no inner circle left, and that he is fearful of assassination and coup d'etat. I earlier read, not in the Financial Times, but in equally disreputable Western newspapers, that Red Square was covered in anti-drone nets, which came as a surprise to me, as I was actually sitting in Red Square when I read it, and there was no anti-drone net in sight. And neither is there today. Neither is Vladimir Putin hiding in a bunker. His cortege of big, powerful cars swept past me on my way to my studio this very evening. Trump is lying when he indicates, through his favorite media mouthpieces, that the pressure on Vladimir Putin is an anti-war pressure. Because I'm here to tell you, again, that the only pressure Vladimir Putin is under in Moscow is pressure to fight this war without the kid gloves on, to finish this war. And I'll tell you, if there are any drones fired at the Victory Day parade on the 9th of May, the entire city centre of Kiev will be obliterated in retaliation. That is to say, every Western embassy. That is to say, every Western photo shoot that the paid influencers constantly shuttle to Kiev to sit with the now foul-smelling, it looks, Zelensky. There'll be no more glad, confident morning in the center of Kiev if a single drone hits the victory parade. That's the mood here. That's the mood that Putin will be responding to when he gives his speech on May the 9th, which, by the way, we've been advised to expect a particularly important speech from him. It's unlikely to be a speech that says, actually, I'm so friendless now. I'm so without an inner circle. I'm so tired of hiding in a bunker. I'm so fearful of assassination that I'm going to surrender to Zelensky and his NATO backers. It's much, much more likely to be a speech of the entirely opposite. When I saw his big convoy go past this evening, I realized, of course, first that the Financial Times was lying again, and then I learned that the Financial Times doesn't even have a reporter in Moscow, and has not had a reporter in Moscow for many years. And so everything in that Financial Times report, on which he's doubled down on television, is either completely made up or is the subject of malicious briefing from intelligence agencies that are using the Financial Times as the sewer for this garbage. There are no bunkers. There's no lack of an inner circle. There's no fear of assassination. There's no backsliding on the special military operation. No matter how many times you predict in the Financial Times and elsewhere, this war will end on Russia's terms, either imposed on the battlefield, or we must pray by negotiated settlement at a negotiated table. A negotiating table which is going to have to hurry up, or this war will end in the worst possible way for Ukraine and all those who have backed it. On the subject of prayer, May is the month of Our Lady, the Virgin Mary, for the Catholic world at least. Therefore, the further desecration of images and icons of the Virgin Mary by Israeli forces in Lebanon, pictured today, is a particularly repugnant and provocative display of anti-Christian hatred. Or maybe it's just anti Catholic hatred. Christians like the Reverend Huckabee, well, they are 10 to a dime and don't add up to a row of beans. But the Roman Catholic Church, 1 billion strong and led by an American Pope, is now the subject of remorseless attack in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, and in South Lebanon. And its pontiff, Leo, is under remorseless attack from Israeli propagandists everywhere. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are putting his life at risk. Since they opened season on Pope Leo, there has been a dramatic spike in the desecration of Catholic churches, attacks on Catholic pilgrims, attacks on nuns in the streets of Jerusalem by so-called Israeli settlers. I call them Israeli terrorists. And now this latest repugnant act. I don't know what he did once the went off, but my imagination shudders to contemplate it. But an Israeli soldier today placed a cigarette in the lips of the Virgin Mary, embraced her in a sexual way in the month of May, the month of Our Lady. Maybe they just don't know what the impact this kind of thing has throughout the world. Maybe they're so stupid they don't even care. But I care, and most of 1 billion people care, and it gives the final lie to the notion that there's anything called Judeo-Christian values. This is one of the biggest lies in history. We know what the attitude to Jesus Christ the Messiah is in Israel. We know what the attitude to the followers of Jesus Christ and his Holy Mother, Mary, in this month of May is. And no amount of $750 million of new Hasbara funds is going to undo that one picture from today. And as I say, God knows what happened to the icon after the camera was switched off. What is about to happen after a very short break is that the greatest living Iranian, Seyed Mohammed Marandi, professor, is going to be dealing with these issues here on the mother of all talk shows. So if I were you, I'd stay tuned. My grandson, Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age, and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, here's the poll this evening. Will Trump try to blow Iran off the face of the earth? His words, not mine. 25,000 people have already voted. Get your vote in on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and if you're one of the advanced guard, on patreon.com/George Galloway. You can vote yes or you can vote no. It is a remarkably balanced poll. This time, your vote will influence the outcome, as well as the quantum of your votes, being an interesting opinion poll of a very select group of people, but a very large one indeed. Will Trump try to blow Iran off the face of the earth? Yes or no? If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Well, let's hear what our esteemed Professor Seyed Mohammed Marandi, the Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran, thinks of this. Professor, thanks for joining us again. Now, I stress, as I always do, you don't speak for the government of Iran, neither can we expect you to know everything that's happening inside the government of Iran. But there's a very clear dichotomy, and that is that either Trump is desperate to get this over with and is prepared to give peace a chance, or, as our poll suggests, he intends to return to the face of the war, and that your people, therefore, will be facing very difficult times indeed, as will the entire world. Which of these two possibilities do you think is the more likely?
Well, thank you very much for having me, George. It's interesting. Right before your program, I was on with Piers Morgan again, and as usual, he calls me the spokesperson or the mouthpiece of the regime, as he loves to call it. And I don't know if he thinks he's insulting me or flattering me, but unfortunately, no one has ever offered me that position in Iran. So maybe he could put a good word in for me somewhere. I think it's the real question, George, for me, is that Trump has, until up to now, said he's going to obliterate Iran. He said he's going to send Iran back to the Stone Age. He said he's going to wipe out the Iranian civilization. And now he says this. In Western media, we haven't seen any outrage. In the UK, in the US, we haven't seen bold headlines condemning him for this. And we haven't seen a single major journalist. These journalists that have millions of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers, who knows how many of them are real or not, but none of them have shown outrage. Not before and not now. It's normal to say, but if you heard to say this about Iran, but if someone in Iran, let's say some obscure MP from some far-off city in Iran that I've never even heard of, comes out and says, we will wipe the French people from the face of the earth, or we will wipe the French people. Imagine the outrage or the response of Western media, which we often see. Some person who is not even in charge, they quote him and then they attribute things to him, or they misquote him, or they distort what he says. We've seen that a lot, how they would twist the wording and then make what the president or some former president had to say. But here, Trump, an English speaker, not the greatest of English speakers, but he has said the same thing in different ways so many times that it's clear as day what he's threatening to do. He's threatening to carry out the most horrific Holocaust in human history by far. And even if he doesn't choose to carry this out, this is itself terrorism. You're being threatened. Your entire family, your neighbors, your neighborhood, your city is being threatened to be demolished. But complete indifference in the West. We also saw this earlier when he spoke about Cuba. And we should never forget what's going on in Cuba either. The Cuban people are besieged, and they're being terrorized, and Trump has threatened in the past to destroy Cuba. But again, no outrage, nothing in the so-called civilized world. So they've demonized us so much in the Western media. They've depicted us as subhuman for so long that it doesn't bother any of these elites. I know that it outrages many, many decent people in the UK and in the US and across the world and across the West. But among the elites that have seen class, it's not even something that deserves to be discussed, apparently.
Well, of course, you make the point that he doesn't speak English very well. That's definitely a problem. But that he speaks entirely contradictory English is more of a problem. It's not actually possible, not being a psychiatrist, to decipher one Donald Trump from another, and there are many, multiple Donald Trumps. So on the principle that, in the words of a very good friend of mine, once at the top of the tree in British political journalism, half of all political news is entirely made up, entirely invented. And then much of the other half is exaggerated, distorted, half-truthed, and all the rest. But the half of it is literally made up. Did Barak Ravid of Axios, for the 7th time this morning, make up the story that a peace deal between the US and Iran was, in his words, imminent?
Yes, it was completely fabricated, and it is believed here that this was to manipulate the markets. And by manipulating the markets, people around Trump and around Witkoff, and probably Kushner too, have made most probably a huge amount of money today. But there is no truth to it. Of course, there are other reasons to manipulate the markets. If they can keep the price of oil, paper oil, down, at least, it serves a psychological purpose, even though you know better than I that oil is not being sold on the spot market in prices anything that are similar to $100. It's roughly $150, $140 per barrel of oil. Sometimes it goes even much higher. But this is all in order to keep people quiet, to have to prevent panic. But at the same time, a lot of people are making a lot of money. I've heard that there's evidence that, again, people have been making, have been moving money around, or moving money around right before the announcement by Axios. And Axios in general, George, you know this, and I'm sorry for saying this because I know your audience knows these things better than I too. But Axios is just Witkoff's psychological warfare tool. And I never take it seriously, and I don't think anyone else should.
Well, there's paper oil, and there's also paper blockades. And it seems to me, and I've been following it with very great attention, as you'd expect, that Iran is now in complete control of the Straits of Hormuz. However many blockades are announced, however many times it's said to be blockaded, however many times even the British government pretends that it's sent non-existent warships to the region. The truth is, Iran commands the Straits of Hormuz like a colossus, and greater control than ever exercised before. And therefore there must come a limit, even for the fools in the stock market, in those who fall for this Axios set of fictions. Iran has the Straits. It's not actually going to walk away from that control, is it?
No, George, it's Iranian territorial water. These are not international waters. This is a myth that Western media likes to create. In fact, Western journalists sometimes contact me, legacy media journalists, of course, and express outrage that this is against international law. And first I tell them, well, I think the war was against international law. The Iranians were minding their own business, and so your outrage about the Strait of Hormuz really doesn't mean too much to me. But I also then tell them that these are not international waters. This is the territorial water that exists between Iran and Oman, and Iran has not signed up to any international agreement which would deny it the right to control those waters. But there's no doubt, in my mind at least, that the United States has been failing from the beginning. At the beginning of the 12-day war last year, Trump demanded unconditional surrender. They failed. They lost the war. The Israeli regime couldn't even keep fighting for more than 12 days. They were begging for a ceasefire after 8 or 9 days. Then the Americans decided, the Trump regime decided to come in, far more powerful than the Israeli regime with all of its American weapons. And at the beginning, he demanded unconditional surrender again. After 39 days, Trump, accepted the Iranian 10-point plan for peace as the framework for negotiations. So he lost the war. That's the second war that he lost. Then after that, with the ceasefire that he and Netanyahu broke, which if the ceasefire had been carried out, right now the global economic crisis would not be nearly as bad as what it is. But because Netanyahu refrained from carrying out the ceasefire, and then Trump sided with Netanyahu, even though the Pakistani government said very clearly that Lebanon was a part of the ceasefire, the Strait of Hormuz remained closed for much of the shipping that is supposed to go through it. And I should point out, by the way, that the Strait of Hormuz has never been closed. It was only closed to ships that belonged to the 5 countries that assisted the United States in carrying out its assault on the Iranian people: Kuwait, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bahrain. So Netanyahu prevented the deal from being implemented, and then Trump imposed a siege. So if Trump did not impose a siege on Iranian ports, we wouldn't be where we are today. But even there he failed, because Trump said, okay, I'm imposed a starve, and they thought they were starving the Iranian people, gloating that Iranian people were starving. They're not starving, but that was their hope, and it just shows how inhumane the Epstein class is. But okay, if they're succeeding, then why did they have to carry out this operation the day before yesterday? All they had to do was sit back and relax and wait for Iran to crumble. It was because the siege was failing too. Instead of bringing the Iranians to a point of collapse, they're bringing the global economy to the point of collapse. And so Trump, in his desperation, carried out this operation, hoping that the Iranians could allow him to let these tankers through, and the Iranians didn't. So again, he failed. So the First World War failed. The Second War failed. The siege failed. This operation failed. And now we're waiting for Trump to most probably carry out an assault on Iran. Not another war, because the war is not over. After the 39 days of aggression, the siege on Iran, which is an act of war, this would be a continuation of the Ramadan. But in any case, we are waiting for an assault. It's not for certain, but it is widely believed here that the threat of an assault on Iran is quite high as we speak. And no one should take anything that Trump says about peace agreements or anything like that seriously.
And were that, God forbid, to happen, what would the Iranian response be?
Oh, it would be decisive, George. The Iranians would hit back very hard. And I think that by now the Americans should have learned their lesson. They have always miscalculated when it comes to the Islamic Republic of Iran and the axis of resistance. The people of Iran, the people of the axis of resistance are extraordinary. Their resilience, their resistance is unbelievable. Look at Lebanon today, George. The ISIS and Al-Qaeda people who they brought to power, who also insulted the churches in Syria. These same, just like the Zionist regime does when it takes churches in Lebanon and insults Saint Mary, who for us, one of the chapters of the Quran is named after Saint Mary. Jesus to Muslims is to Shias in particular, he's infallible. He's one of the prophets alongside Prophet Muhammad and Abraham and Moses as an infallible prophet. So constantly insulting, I mean, the two are the same, the ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Zionist enemy. But Hezbollah and the resistance and its supporters, which are Christian and Druze and Muslim and Shia and Sunni, the resistance, despite being surrounded by these sinister forces, look at their resilience today. Look at how badly the Israeli regime is being punished by the resistance. And every time a successful operation is carried out, in their rage, they go and bomb civilians. They go and bomb families. They murder entire extended families out of rage and spite. So the resistance, whether in Lebanon or in Yemen or in Gaza or in Iran or in Iraq, is extraordinary. And the resilience of the people is something that I think is beyond the comprehension of the likes of Trump. So if they attack, Iran will hit back hard. And in my belief, George, we are heading for a deep recession as it is. And if this continues for much longer, it's going to be a depression. But if there is war, then I think there will be a very deep depression. Because especially, I mean, there are two types of war. One is if Trump carries out a short war, and the other is a long war. A short war is very dangerous in the sense that once Iran starts striking back, Trump will, in his arrogance and because of his ego, will demand more strikes against Iran. So a short war can end up in a long war again, which could last for weeks. So let's imagine that we do have a war that lasts a while. More infrastructure will be destroyed. If critical infrastructure is destroyed, then Iran will strike Zionist critical infrastructure, but also the critical infrastructure of these regimes in the region that host U.S. forces. We are in the month of May, and in weeks, in 2 or 3 weeks, it is going to become very hot in the Persian Gulf and in the Arabian Peninsula. Just like in Russia, they have general winter. Here, the Iranians have general summer, I suppose. It will be very difficult for the Americans to fight under such circumstances. And if critical infrastructure, which they threaten to strike and destroy in Iran, meaning electrical power plants, well, if they do that, then Iran will have to do the same. And if that happens, these regimes will become impossible to live in, not only for people, ordinary people, but also American soldiers, the aggressors. So I don't think this is going to end well at all for the United States. It's not going to end well for these family dictatorships that are complicit in war. But again, it's Trump, and the Trump regime is obedient to Zionism. And the Zionists don't care about the American people or the global economy. They don't care about the Indian economy or the Ugandan economy or the economy of Argentina or the EU. They care about Zionism. They don't care about the American people. So Kushner and Witkoff, their allegiances are clear. And Netanyahu and Trump are more than willing to sacrifice the world for the sake of this ethno-supremacist and genocidal regime. So, although it sounds crazy, but it is quite possible that war could be, the United States could restart the war, and it could lead to the complete devastation of all oil and gas assets and electrical power plants in the Persian Gulf region. And that would mean that there would be no more oil or gas or anything else for years from this region. And that, I think, would mean that we would live in a very, very different world in the months ahead, God forbid.
Now, finally, as a professor, distinguished professor of English literature, I know that you'll be familiar with the work of my countryman, Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock Holmes series, of which I'm a very great fan. You'll recall, therefore, his aphorism about the dog that didn't bark, or the shoe that didn't drop. I'm wondering about Yemen, which is, as I look at this, so far, the dog that didn't bark, or the shoe that didn't drop. Is there a reason why Yemen has not yet become involved in a big way in this confrontation? If they do become involved, what would be the consequences of their involvement?
Well, just as a small footnote, I'm a big fan of his work and of Sherlock Holmes, but interestingly, he wasn't a big fan of his own stories on Sherlock Holmes, and he wanted to get rid of Sherlock Holmes. But ironically, he's known for Sherlock Holmes. Yemen, George, I think the best way to put it is that everything depends on the escalation ladder. Iran, the axis of resistance, did not start this war. And every time we saw escalation, it began with Trump and Netanyahu, not the Iranians, not the Iraqis, not Yemen. So it depends on how far up the escalation ladder the American Trump goes and Netanyahu goes. If it goes, the higher it goes, the more engaged the axis of resistance will become. And the same is true with Iraq. Iraqis can do much more, the resistance, than they did. But it was decided to have a managed escalation. The same is true with Iran. If I'm sure your audience remembers, during the last day of the war, the 39-day war, the Ramadan war, the Iranians hit exceptionally hard. Or also on another occasion when the Epstein coalition bombed Iran's South Pars gas field, the Iranians immediately struck back very hard and destroyed key elements of Qatar's gas installations. And that caused Trump to put out a Truth Social tweet saying this won't happen again. So it depends on what the United States wants. Iran does not want a global economic crisis. Iran does not want war. We are not warmongers, unlike the United States and the Israeli regime. But we will not appease the enemy. Iran is not like those countries that when Trump threatens them with trade warfare, they back down and accept the U.S. demands on tariffs and so on. Iran is not going to appease Trump. Iran will be steadfast, and it will hit back hard and make sure that Trump regrets what he did. How do we know that? Because Trump accepted Iran's 10-point plan during the last day of the war, and that was a humiliation for Trump. And many people attacked him for that, and that's why his spokeswoman afterwards said that no, we threw it into the bin, the Iranian 10-point plan. But it was clear, he accepted it, he tweeted, he posted it. So everything depends on the United States. Iran does not want war. Before this war started, people were doing business. Iran wasn't even controlling the Strait of Hormuz. The biggest mistake that Netanyahu has made, and the same is true with Trump, is launching this war. They have pushed Iran to taking control of the Strait of Hormuz, which will remain in Iran's hands from now on. Any Zionist, any of these fanatical Zionists, should be outraged that Netanyahu's own war and his own warmongering has led to the shift in the balance of power away from the Israeli regime, away from the United States, and to the benefit of the global majority, the axis of resistance, and of course, Iran. And just one final point, George. The world is sick and tired of the Israeli regime. Not only have they seen 2.5 years of genocide, but now they're seeing that the well-being of people across the world is being threatened by this monstrous regime and the Trump regime. I've been speaking to a number of Indian reporters separately. They didn't come to Iran together, but by coincidence, I met them within 2 days, a number of them in Tehran. And they're saying that in India, which you know is the government has had a bad track record when it comes to Palestine and the Palestinian cause and the genocide, these journalists who come from different political backgrounds and different media outlets have been telling me that the mood in India has changed and it has turned against the Israeli regime for the most part and against Trump. So when they lose India, you can imagine how bad things are across the world.
Amen. Professor Marandi, as always, go safely. You are in the eyes of all of us here at the mother of all talk shows. God bless you and keep you. Will Trump try to blow Iran off the face of the earth? Well, you've heard the oracle. What say you? Yes or no? It's a remarkably close poll. I have not actually seen a poll so close in a very, very long time. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls coming up next. Stay tuned. His approval ratings are in the toilet. He won a huge mandate well less than a year ago, and he's thrown it all away. He has an approval rating of just under 40% now, and a disapproval rating of all the others. There are no don't knows in the issue of Donald Trump. And so he has maximized the number of people who hate him or dislike him, and he has systematically undermined the voting base that formerly liked him. And I don't know whether that is because of his donors, because he's intellectually challenged, because it's of his age. I really don't know.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's hit the phones. Mohammed in Nigeria. That was my good wife going under the camera there. Mohammed in Nigeria is first up on the calls. Welcome, Mohammed. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Mr. George. I hope I'm clear, I'm audible.
Very clear. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it's been long without getting in touch. Since the beginning of this Iran war, when we talked, we haven't been in touch because I have been following all your trends on social media, and that's good. You are doing a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir.
All right. I have a clear message to the world. I know we are living in a world where the oppressors enjoy their lives to the fullest, and the oppressed are dying like ants. The ongoing war in Iran gives a clear sense to the U.S. citizens of why they are dragged into a war they are not related to, and shows who they are, enemies and their friends. Historically, on Sunday, 18th June 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte refused to follow the orders of his generals at the Battle of Waterloo. The aftermath was he was defeated severely, resulting in the end of his wars. I have a clear message to the citizens of the universe that open your eyes like eagles, not owls. We are living in a civilized world, and if there should be peace on planet Mars, why won't it be on planet Earth?
Well, we've lost Mohammed, unfortunately. That was shaping to be a very interesting philosophical discussion. Let's go to the Philippines, where Patrick wants to talk about Israel's nuclear capability. Patrick, welcome.
Hi, George. Great to talk with you. I'm a regular viewer of your show, and I want to congratulate you on the great work you do. My question, George, and it's kind of baffled me for quite some time. Why is it that the Iranians never discuss or put on the table the Israeli nuclear weapons, which everybody knows that Israel has? Why isn't this part of their discussion or negotiation in their 10-point plan or a 14-point plan, whatever? It's not included from what I see. I'm just baffled, and I'm interested in your opinion, George, as to why that isn't mentioned by the Iranians, because it's clearly a very, very important issue, because the Israelis have nuclear weapons which are not subject to any kind of scrutiny or whatever, and they obviously developed them secretly over many, many years. Why don't the Iranians put this on the table as part of the entire, negotiation process? And surely that would be to their advantage if they did. I'm really interested, George, to hear your opinion as to why they don't.
It's such a good question. I don't know if they do. I've heard them do so before, but perhaps you're right. They haven't accentuated the issue, and one could speculate as to what the reason for that might be. It's certainly on my agenda constantly. I'm constantly making the point whenever the issue of Iranian nuclear weapons comes up. It's simple. Iran has no nuclear weapons and has turned its face away from the development of nuclear weapons by religious fatwa from the founder of the Islamic Republic, the late Ayatollah Khomeini. I have been involved in this issue for a very long time. I was following some of the work of Andrew Neil earlier today, the former one-time editor of the Sunday Times and then later long time at the BBC, and still a force to be reckoned with in broadcasting and journalism. I remember I was living in London and often in Leicester Square at the very time that Mordechai Vanunu, the brave Jewish whistleblower, Israeli citizen, came to London to tell the world about the secret and illegal acquisition by Israel of hundreds of nuclear warheads. And I became involved in it because of my long war with Robert Maxwell, which ended in triumph for me and in the drink for him, the father, of course, of Ghislaine Maxwell, because I was the person who alleged in Parliament that Vanunu was betrayed by Robert Maxwell, who pretended that the Mirror Group newspapers were going to reveal the story that Vanunu had brought from Dimona itself. He was working as a nuclear technician in Dimona and brought the drawings and the photographs and all the evidence of Israel's secret and deadly nuclear weapons fleet. And he approached, very foolishly, Robert Maxwell's Mirror Group of newspapers. And Maxwell pretended that he was interested in the story, only to then betray Vanunu to a Mossad agent called Cindy in Leicester Square at a fun fair there, a honey trap. Cindy promised Vanunu a good time if only she'd come back to her digs. He'd come back to her digs with her, which he did, and was then kidnapped, trussed up, drugged, secretly flown out of Britain as baggage, and thence to Rome, and thence to Israel, and then into a courtroom with his jaws wired up like Hannibal Lecter, so that he couldn't say anything in the court that would further expose this illegal nuclear weapons fleet that Israel held. But the one man who did publish the story, and the diagrams, and the photographs, and the drawings, was Andrew Neil's Sunday Times, and we owe him a debt of gratitude for that. So the story did come out, albeit in broadsheet rather than tabloid terms, and maybe the better for that. But Vanunu paid with 18 years of solitary confinement in an Israeli dungeon for that. So the issue of Israel's nuclear weapons is always in my mind, always in my heart. And the fear that Israel will use those nuclear weapons against goodness knows whom. Maybe against only Arab targets, maybe against Iran, but maybe against Europe, if its anger at European policy shifts were to go further than it already has. So you're right. This should be at the top of everyone's agenda. Why is Iran not allowed to have one nuclear weapon when Israel is allowed to have hundreds of nuclear weapons? And since the mid-1980s, everyone has known about that. Thanks to Mordechai Vanunu, and thanks, to be fair, to Andrew Neil and the Sunday Times. Thank you, Patrick. Enjoy the Philippines. Glorious place. Used to go there in the 1980s regularly, working with the 1st of May trade union, the KMU, and traveling widely under the dictatorship of Marcos at that time. Now, a big thank you to some of tonight's top Moats supporters who've been backing the program through the moats.tv website. Andrew Tarr, Gerard Magari, Steve Hood, John L. Mercer, and C.D. Tran. Thank you, every one of you, for your generosity. And thank you for those who are going to take their example and follow them at moats.tv. You can give anything you like. You can give £1 or $1 or €1. Surely I'm worth one of those. You can give a regular donation. You can give a one-off donation in any currency. So please, please do so. Now, let me take a quick break, because have I got a treat for you coming up. It's the one and only Kit Klarenberg. Like me, a Briton in exile. Like me, a man who's been arrested at an airport for telling the truth. But has he got a story for you? MI6, are you watching? Kit Klarenberg on next. After this short break, stay tuned. Beautiful call, as always, robust. Terrific characterization of little Macron and the imposter Shah of Los Angeles. He is, of course, an imposter in two ways. He's an imposter in pretending that he has any support from the great mass of the 90 million Iranians who've not seen him since he was 4 years old, when he fled with their riches in the saddlebags, and the father and mother, emperor, empress, Shah, roamed around the world from Monaco to God knows where, spending the millions that they had stolen from the people of Iran. But he's a pretender, an impostor, for a second reason. The Pahlavis are not even the royal family of Iran. The royal family of Iran is ancient, millennia, and the rightful emperor or Shah, if there is such a thing as a rightful emperor, rightful Shah, was overthrown by a corporal in the Iranian army, the grandfather of this joker Reza. His grandfather was a corporal, a private soldier in the Iranian army, was raised to the rank of corporal, and then, with British backing, overthrew the actual monarch. And he had a son who was the infamous Shah of Shahs, the father of Reza. So he's a double imposter.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Kit Klarenberg is one of the star reporters on the Grayzone, easily the best journalistic outfit in the world. And Kit Klarenberg's work is one of the main reasons for that. He is a most welcome guest. Before we go on to wider subjects, Kit, we may be living in the last hours of Keir Starmer's premiership. If the local election results tomorrow go as badly as they're widely predicted to do, it may very well be that he'll be gone before you can say Jack Robinson, and a nation will rejoice. What are your main thoughts on the eve of Keir Starmer's final day, if it turns out to be that way?
Well, if this is indeed Starmageddon, all I can say is, inshallah, a very hearty one indeed. This is a man who has risen to a position of extraordinary power on the basis of lies, on the basis of crime, and on the basis of concealing absolutely horrendous, egregious wrongdoing by the security and intelligence services, and also his dear friend, Jimmy Savile. So I don't think he shall be mourned at all. I think that he'll largely be a very dull footnote, a streak of urine down the leg of British politics, never to return and never to be thought of ever again. I mean, he replaced the rather diminutive little Rishi Sunak, who was the Britain's least popular prime minister in history, and then went on to become even less popular, which is quite an extraordinary achievement after a long litany of absolutely reprehensible behaviour of the most corrupt kind. One by one, all of his backers in the media have vanished. One by one, his power structure within the Labour Party, which includes unflushable turds like Peter Mandelson, has been systematically dismantled. Now, all that's left is for Labour to blame him for bad local election results, and they're finally rid of him. Who they're going to replace him with, I don't know. I wouldn't care, but the British government seems determined to drag the nation into war, perhaps with Russia, in the near future. So, that's a cause for concern. But evidently, Keir Starmer wasn't the man to sell it to the British public.
No, and it's difficult to understand just how comprehensively he's blown what was a record parliamentary majority. To those of us who followed them for longer, it was always within the wood and a block of wood. I called him right from the beginning, but it was always something rotten in that piece of wood. He has always been a creature of the deep state, has he not?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to bear in mind that I mentioned I mentioned how he'd helped conceal the crimes of MI5 and MI6. This is a guy who has worked in very close coordination, indeed in lockstep, with the security intelligence services, defending and concealing their crimes domestically and overseas. It's rather forgotten now, but rather sadly, during the War on Terror, the CIA ran what was known as an extraordinary rendition program, which involved kidnapping people who are often completely innocent but had been accused of terroristic crimes, quote unquote, and rendering them to a variety of CIA prisons, black sites around Europe and around the world. And then before ultimately rendering them to Guantanamo Bay. The MI5 and MI6 were heavily involved, the full extent of which we will likely never know. Keir Starmer was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, a much lauded role, while the Metropolitan Police were looking into this. They amassed thousands of pages of evidence, including direct faxes from a MI6 officer to counterparts in the Libyan intelligence services, openly discussing the rendering and enhanced interrogation of a terror suspect. This is bombshell black and white evidence. Keir Starmer decided not to move on it, much to the chagrin of the police, who'd spent many years and enormous amounts of money unearthing incontrovertible evidence of MI5 being involved in and MI6 being involved in very, very serious crimes. He then subsequently attended Jonathan Evans, MI5 chief, his leaving drinks, although Keir Starmer apparently can't remember if they spoke there. I'm sure that the ever forensic barrister, his memory is just escaping him. He's not just barefacedly lying to conceal. But yes, and I think there's another wrinkle here to add as well, which a lot of people haven't picked up on, is Britain's Intelligence and Security Committee, which is the parliamentary body set up to oversee the work of the intelligence services. Under Starmer has been absolutely gutted of funding when it was already struggling to operate at its budgetary levels. Keir Starmer has said and done absolutely nothing about it, but the head of the ISC, which, yes, is meant to provide some degree of oversight, has complained that there are billions being spent on GCHQ and MI5 and MI6 and the rest of the alphabet soup on spying operations with no idea what that money is being spent on at all, and zero democratic oversight. But Keir Starmer has not done anything to alleviate that. The obvious question arises whether this is the security and intelligence services cashing in a particular debt he may owe them. Whether they played some role in placing him in power, that remains an open question. Jeremy Corbyn was pretty much openly threatened by MI5 and MI6 over his various foreign policy positions. I'm guessing that didn't happen with Starmer because he's their guy. They don't need to tell him what to do. But yeah, aspect of Starmer's biography that, again, very few people, not enough people know. He's part of the Trilateral Commission, which is this deeply spooky, call it a think tank or talking shop for elites, where they're very open about the fact that they see their objective as ensuring people remain pacified, ensuring that they remain in a state of kind of covert oppression, where they're unable to seriously challenge power in any meaningful way. And they produce reports on how there should be less education, for example. So this is Starmer was part of this. He's never been asked about it by a mainstream outlet, but it seems rather relevant to understandanding who he is and what his politics are, because it's not remotely clear from anything he actually says, let alone all of the smiling photo ops where he just so happens to be having a pint of beer with some blokes, because he's actually a really normal person, of course, who can chair a meeting and write a memo. I think those are meant to be his tremendous attributes for power.
Well, they took him a long way. Now, you mention these spooky organizations. I mean, once upon a time, and not that long ago, we weren't allowed to know the name of the head of the security service, but now we do. And perhaps we know rather too much about her and her background. But she was pictured covertly at the recent Bilderberg outfit. The service is now in the hands of someone with a vested interest in this part of the world where I'm sitting now. Her animus towards Russia, for example, and not only Russia, but anyone considered to be soft on Russia, is driving MI6's agenda in this part of the world. And it's not only in Russia. They've taken a turn towards seeking to destabilize the governments of Slovakia, the previous government of Hungary, and of course the government of Serbia. What can you tell us about how they do that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the fall of Orban, I mean, I myself, of course, was no fan of the guy, and his politics certainly aren't my own. Indeed, he espoused views and policies that in many cases, I found repellent. Nonetheless, he is a long-standing irritant to the EU, largely German imperial ambitions, not only in Central and Eastern Europe, but just the Europe more widely. And he not only was a block on further EU expansion and the rendering of bottomless financial aid and weaponry to Ukraine in this kind of godforsaken quagmire in Donbass. But not only that, he was a sponsor of Eurosceptic thought via universities, NGOs, media outlets. That's all gone now. And not only that, Ursula von der Leyen, who just seems less and less of a pantomime villain, more a genuinely frightening one with every single day. Within minutes of Orban's loss, she kind of gave the game away by openly stating this is the end of veto power in foreign policy. Now, in EU foreign policy, for years the EU's been unable to agree on anything, and that's in large part because individual member states can shoot down particular policies, and all member states have to vote unanimously for the EU to do things. Ursula von der Leyen explicitly stated that this is over now, and very quickly began turning the screws on Slovakia and Serbia. Serbia and Germany, of course, have a long-running enmity. World War I was largely concerned with German and Austro-Hungarian attempts to destroy Serbia as a political entity, as a country, and that enmity has gone nowhere. Germany were at the forefront of NATO 99 bombing, and would be very, very pro the use of force to remove meddlesome leaders in their midst. Of course, Berlin was played a key role in the breakup of Yugoslavia in the first place, encouraging countries like Slovenia and Croatia to unilaterally declare dependence, again contrary to the wishes of numerous European governments and the UN at the time. And this has gone nowhere. It's just not really been noticed. So Slovakia faces having its funding frozen, which was one of the mechanisms by which Orban was removed from power. Peter Magyar, whose surname literally means Hungarian, who appears to have come from central casting and received an enormous amount of EU funding in order to oust Orban. He's talked about reinstituting Austro-Hungarian, openly talked about reinstituting Austro-Hungarian imperialism in Central and Eastern Europe. And yes, he ran on a platform of, well, if you elect me, then I will unlock all these funds which are being withheld from you. And Hungary, much like the rest of Europe, is suffering greatly due to ongoing wars, due to inflation, all sorts of economic problems. So this was quite some kryptonite, and it contributed massively to Magyar's landslide victory in Slovakia. In 2023, Robert Fico, who's historically been seen as someone on the left or the centre left with Eurosceptic views, he won by a landslide, and he remains very popular locally, despite unrelenting efforts to demonize him as some kind of Hitler character or some Trumpite populist, whatever that means. None of this is true, but he faces very serious problems ahead if the same economic chokehold is applied to Slovakia, which the EU has shown every intention of doing. The EU is also seeking to weaponize disinformation as grounds for political censorship and repression in Slovakia, but also elsewhere, irrespective of your particular affiliation. Now, Serbia is an interesting case because it's not part of the EU, and it's a kind of long-running battle by Western powers to attempt to embroil it in the EU, despite the fact that 80% of the public is opposed to it. Now, MI6 and the British have, in the former Yugoslavia, the Western Balkans, played a key role in preparing, quote unquote, countries for NATO and EU membership. In many cases, countries that didn't want to join, particularly in respect of NATO. People remember the 99 bombing. They are viscerally, vehemently opposed to Serbia being any part of this. In Montenegro, the figures were which was similarly bombed in 1999. It was overwhelming public opposition to joining due to MI6 skullduggery. Montenegro got absorbed in 2016, and Macedonia, which is now called North Macedonia, it was shunted in despite, again, significant public opposition. I believe it was in 2020 they finally joined after much toing and froing, and MI6 again was at the forefront of this. Britain has a dedicated plan called Global Britain in the Balkans. You can Google this and find it. They openly talk about the necessity of Britain taking the lead on quote unquote reforms to the political and legal and financial systems of countries so they're ready for membership. This grants the British an enormous amount of influence locally and regionally. Its influence they frequently seek to abuse in the most egregious manner. And I think in the case of Serbia, you not only have a grassroots resistance to joining the EU and NATO, you also have very close relations between Belgrade and Beijing and Moscow. So that's another thing that the EU and indeed the British particularly are absolutely rabid about and desperate to neutralize. Again, Ursula von der Leyen, in one of her many belligerent and really quite disturbing pronouncements, stated the EU must purge itself of all Chinese, Russian, and even Turkish influence. I'm old enough to remember when there was controversy over Turkey joining. It looks like the EU doesn't want them, but they want Ukraine. That's for sure.
Now, of course, it doesn't stop at the publicly available, Googleable maneuvers. They set up all kinds of fronts, don't they? I mean, there's one I'm looking at, this BIRN, B-I-R-N, which is undoubtedly a British intelligence cutout. And its efforts stoop a lot lower than the British government would be able to officially stoop. To discrediting individual political leaders and so on in Serbia. And I'm doing my best to find out more about that. Can you tell me anything about it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, at the Grayzone, I believe it was a couple of years ago now, we exposed how the British have heavily penetrated BIRN at every conceivable level. And you're right, it is frequently used to publish absolutely brazen political attack jobs on people that the British government doesn't like in the Balkans. Funnily enough, I was one of them, and a Bosnian fact-checking website came after me with some ferocity without even asking me for comment on the story a number of years ago. They refused to retract when I understandably got rather upset about that. But BIRN for a very long time has been very dominant in shaping narratives about what is happening in the Balkans and why. I don't know anyone in the region. I've never met a single person person in the region who reads this or sees it as anything other than MI6 propaganda is reflexively dismissed and discredited by token of anything that Byrne publishes is reflexively dismissed and discredited by token of being published by Byrne. And I on the one hand, struggle to see why so much money gets pumped into it. On the other, it's very, very useful for informing what Western media, particularly English language media, reports on the Balkans. So you can find articles in the New York Times and the Guardian where they're attacking some local leader or politician or Chinese and Russian economic activity in the region, and the outlets will say, an independent news website, BIRN or Balkan Insight, which is their kind of flagship product, has reported. And what they actually mean is, a totally not independent, completely MI6 dependent information source with a history of publishing fake news that's not believed by anyone has claimed, which is very, very useful. It's distancing, and yes, it's a way of intelligence agencies, particularly MI6, but also the CIA and the German BND, of getting material they want out there. I documented for the Grayzone how most of Byrne's senior staff are all graduates of the Chevening Scholarship, which is a British Foreign Office provided free year or free university course at a prestigious British uni to potential future leaders and individuals of interest in target countries. The leaked documents related to this, related to Byrne, openly state that the purpose is to create a pipeline of people who will be influencers for the British and serve British interests in Serbia and throughout the region. These are the people who are working there, people who've been in close contact with the British Council and the local British Embassy and MI6 for much of their lives. Actually, they're probably monitored as to what they're doing and saying, and prodded in the right direction if there's any sense that they're stepping out of line. Now, another aspect to bear in mind with this is that Byrne publishes, as I mentioned, this relentless stream of negative stories about China and Russia. This is explicitly concerned with attempting to damage relations between the two countries, but it also hands the EU ammunition to batter Serbia and other countries that in the region that haven't joined yet, and by demanding they approve their Western pro-EU credentials and shut down this Chinese infrastructure project, or perhaps don't accept this offer of a loan. Recently, since the start of the proxy war in Ukraine, Serbia, because it does have extensive economic ties with Russia, has been under unrelenting pressure to sanction Russia, despite the fact the overwhelming majority of people don't support it. And by any objective measure, it would be an absolute disaster for their economy. But of course, the EU is not remotely concerned. As I say, von der Leyen is determined to rid the region rid Europe of Russian influence. So it's really quite shocking what has been constructed by Western intelligence in the Balkans and more generally, but Serbia specifically. And it doesn't end with just Byrne. There are anti-corruption NGOs, fact-checking websites, all manner of civil society operations, which are ultimately run by MI6. And I mentioned disinformation being a cudgel the EU exploits to crack down on dissenting viewpoints. Again, the British are at the forefront of this. I've exposed something called Open Information Partnership, an Orwellian name if ever there was one, where in leaked documents related to this, and it operates throughout Central and Eastern Europe, they openly refer to how countering Russian disinformation is often difficult because it's factually true. amongst other, key barriers in this informational onslaught. So yeah, it's all very, very, very murky, and I think that it is well understood that the Balkans is a region with much history, and it's also a region that typically favors self-governance and has sought to rid itself of meddlesome Western imperial powers, and this is just another phase. This is another phase in the fight.
Feel the burn, and we're paying for it all. Thanks very much indeed, as always. Kit Klarenberg, star reporter on the Grayzone. Quick break, and then it's your calls all the way up to Gayatri. Stay tuned. Let's go to our old friend Declan in Dublin, who's online too. Go ahead, Declan.
Right, George. There's a very big protest in the town of Taibeh, the last Christian village on the West Bank. If they lose this, they are finished in the Holy Land. I'd like to take the chance to salute Francesca Albanese, who is the greatest woman, I think, of our generation. And the hope is that there are other Francesca Albaneses out there who will do something, because the Western churches, the Catholic Church especially, and the other main churches are doing absolutely nothing for their co-religionists in the Holy Land, just like they did nothing for them in Syria or in Iraq.
They don't even talk about them, never mind do anything. And all these Christian politicians, and all these Christian leaders, and most of the Christian clergy haven't done or said even jack to come to their aid. They're not Christians, most of these politicians. When they say they're Christians, better count your spoons, or better still, count the burning Christian houses.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's hear from Thomas in Florida on Christian Zionists. Go ahead, Thomas.
Hello, George. First of all, I want to say I appreciate you, and I have and I admire Professor Marandi as well, your previous guest, and I hold a high regard for people who have a high regard for truth.
I mean. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and about the Christian Zionism, I don't believe, or Christian Zionists, people who call themselves Christian Zionists, I don't believe there is such a thing. It's like somebody saying they're a Christian Zionist is like, as far as from what I've seen, is like somebody calling themselves a compassionate sadist or a truthful liar, or it just doesn't go together.
It's positively Orwellian. It's like being a Celtic and Rangers fan. Anyway, go on, Thomas.
Well, just to get to the point, I think what it is to me, what seems more likely to me, is that these are actually Zionist Jews who are pretending to be Christians in order to manipulate, like non-Jewish Christian populations, and to
well, some of them are, but there are plenty of actual Christian Zionists, however contradictory that seems to be. I've encountered them myself. So, I mean, Huckabee is not Jewish, but he couldn't be more Zionist. Ditto Lindsey Graham. in South Carolina, for now at least, couldn't be more Zionist, but is not Jewish. So as I always like to point out, no, I'm sure. Not all Jews are Zionists, and not all Zionists are Jews. In fact, many Jews are not Zionists, but most Zionists are not Jews. This is something that I have long insisted upon, and of course the possibility of conversion exists. But why convert? Because they only want you not as a Jew, they want you as a Zionist. So you're more used to them, the Zionists, if you do not convert but remain Christian. Thomas, thanks for that. Big news on the podcast this week. We're in the top 10 for politics in Indonesia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and Egypt tonight. And we're also in the top 30 for politics in South Africa, Liberia, Saudi Arabia, Cote d'Ivoire, and Venezuela. Interestingly, you can download the Moats podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen. Now let's go live to the Flotilla, which we spoke about on the last show as having again been subject to international piracy, to the brutalization of multiple nationalities, people who were civilians, humanitarians, trying to get aid into Gaza, have been brutally treated once again by Zionist stormtroopers. One of my old friends who's been on many a flotilla and many a convoy with me is Fra Hughes from the north of Ireland. Fra, where are you and what can you tell us?
Hello, George. Honour to be on the show. Thank you so much. My first convoy to Gaza was with you in 2010 on Viva Palestina 5. We are actually anchored outside of La Petra, which is a port in Crete. We left Sicily just over around 10 days ago, just prior to the interception. So I think it was the 30th of April when they intercepted 22 boats in international waters, 600 miles from the illegal blockade of the Gazan shores. They took 177 people prisoner, kidnapped illegally. They were put onto what appeared to be a renovated cargo ship that had containers, shipping containers, which were then used to corral these people who had been illegally abducted. And many people were brutally beaten. Many people were tortured. There are sadly reports of sexual misconduct towards members who were taken and subjected to this form of physical abuse. And then both Tiago Avila and Saif Abukesh have been abducted and taken to Israel. So we've had 177 people of all races, of many different nationalities, many different cultures, all innocent people traveling under international passports, trying to bring medicine, love, solidarity, empathy and compassion to the people of Gaza. 34 people were hospitalized. One person, to the best of my knowledge, is still in hospital with 6 broken ribs and an inflamed diaphragm and needs oxygen to help them breathe. So this is the attack in international waters, 600 miles from Gaza. In fact, people were wondering, were those people who were initially abducted, were they going to be charged with illegally trying to enter Israel? Because that is the charge that's been used before. But these false terrorism charges that are being levelled against Tiago and Saif is nothing but a smokescreen and an apparent attempt to derail the flotilla and stop people stepping forward in future with the fear of sexual misconduct, brutality, torture and long-term imprisonment. And for anyone who hasn't read the letter that Tiago Avila has written to his daughter, I would encourage you to read it. It sounds very much like a farewell letter, and it's so sad to see a man who has done so much to help innocent people suffering from genocide and ethnic cleansing, and I believe his mother has just died in the last day or two. So could you imagine being beaten, tortured? He is being held in isolation with 24-hour stimulation for sleep deprivation, blindfolded, beaten, and now his mother's died while he is in captivity.
What a story. Look, on the face of it, every single fact that you told us there is an illegal act. Now, I know that the law and Israel are two words that shouldn't be used in the same sentence, but every one of those people has a passport and has a nationality, a state. Is there any intention on the part of those states whose citizens have been illegally abducted, brutalized, and even tortured? Is there any intention on the part of any of their states to take international legal action?
That is a very powerful, insightful question, and I'll explain why. When our guys were abducted, we actually had an Israeli warship come within 200 meters of our boat. They shone a big white light, like 1,000 candlelight power, but they didn't intercept us. They went on towards Safsaf. That was the boat that had Tiago Avia. We had actually been, some of our boat participants had been swimming in the water with Tiago before his abduction. The people who were corralled onto these shipping containers and beaten, many were taken out singly and taken into a separate area to be beaten and abused and threatened. Then those people were brought to the island of Crete. Can you imagine a foreign naval body attacking civilian flotilla unarmed in the Mediterranean Sea, which then brings those people to the port of one of the ports in Crete, disembarks them onto the land, where the Greek Cretan authorities took those people, 175 people, took 34 to the hospital, took the rest to the airport in the capital of Heraklion, and encouraged them to go on the planes and return to their countries of home destination. Only the people from Turkey who were repatriated by the Turkish government, everyone else refused to get on a plane. Everyone else walked out of that airport because they had committed no criminal crime. They walked out of the airport, they began to walk towards Heraklion, and the Greeks sent police riot squads. There are videos of our guys, our comrades, men and women, some as young as 19, some as old as 72, walking down the main road with a police riot squad escort. So the Greek government is fully complicit in what happened in international waters by facilitating our people being put on buses in Crete and being encouraged to leave. In my opinion, NATO was fully aware of what was happening. They all have satellites, they all have radar. The Italians knew, the Greeks knew, NATO knew, the EU knew, the Americans knew, everybody knew. The only people who didn't know what was going to happen were the innocent people on the flotilla who have then suffered. Now we have the remainder of the flotilla. We have the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, 4 boats that last night were being tracked in the Mediterranean by helicopters and by the same Israeli warships that abducted our comrades in the Mediterranean. They didn't intercept them last night. I personally believe that they don't want to take 22 ships, then another 4, then another 15, then another 20, because each time they do that, they build up the revulsion of common people around the globe to these acts of piracy on international waters. So I believe they're going to allow them to join us, and then we have to leave Greek waters in order to go to meet our comrades in Turkey who have boats who are joining the flotilla. And at one point of the journey, we must again enter international water. So again, it is my opinion that as soon as we go into international water, as soon as we leave Greek territorial waters, it'll be open season on the flotilla. I think they want to detain and kidnap us in international waters near Europe, because they want to do the same thing, which is kidnap people, then regurgitate them into a compliant state that will then send them home. And I forgot to mention that the 22 boats that they took everyone from, they damaged the sailing rigging and they put sugar in the engines, and all of those boats are not only out of commission but are actually a maritime hazard to anyone sailing through the Med. There are 22 ships currently floating through the Mediterranean as an obstacle to marine navigation. So I think they want to take us. They want to put us in a compliant state to send us home. I think they have enough on their plate without having us go all the way to the previous interception lines, the orange zone, 150 miles from the Gazan coast, then take us to Ashdod, then take us to Ashkelon and the prison system and put us through. They're more happy to find a compliant state. And we just heard today that Greece, Cyprus and Israel have a tripartite military agreement for 2026 where they're going to have joint military operations, and it proves more and more that the influence that the Zionist racist fascist state has in Europe is stronger than any of us have ever really known. We just see the surface, but the flotilla, which is focusing on Gaza, is exposing the complicity of the European countries, and for that it's worth every day at sea and every nautical mile closer to Gaza.
It is. God bless you and keep you, Fra, and keep us posted. We're not going to let this story go away, and we'll continue to follow it closely, and hopefully with you able to talk to us, to give us a picture, as you have very vividly in the last 10 minutes or so. Fra Hughes, good friend of the show and one of the heroes of the flotilla, suffering such depredation at the hands of the settler state right now. Thanks, Fra. Let's go to Frank in California, who wants to talk about the war in Iran. Go ahead, Frank.
How you doing, George? First, I want to call you the hero of Sky News. Ever since you were the first one to call out Israel as a terrorist state, I knew you were a voice of freedom of speech. But I'm kind of confused. I feel like I'm in the matrix right now. I hear other podcasters talking about these powerful entities that it seems to me, is it taboo to talk about them? This podcaster openly talks about BlackRock, talks about China BRICS to make sense of what's going on in Iran and in Ukraine. And it makes sense to me, but nobody else seems to be talking about those two powerful entities. Is that censorship? Is it taboo? I feel confused. I need a hero like you, George. Somebody
not here. It's certainly not here. So go ahead and talk about it. Go on.
Well, this guy, his name's Seyed from Middle Nation. I don't know if you've heard of him. I like his foreign policy, how he explains foreign policy, and everything else is kind of religious. I try to shy away from that. But basically, he's talking about how China BRICS is the future. It's where all the investment's going to go. So what's good for China BRICS is good for BlackRock, right? That's what BlackRock does. They invest. And he also says that BlackRock pretty much controls the U.S. foreign policy. I mean, 'cause they have, $30 trillion worth of assets. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If whatever's good for China BRICS in the Middle East and Iran, like peace and stability, then that's going to be good for BlackRock. And if it's good for BlackRock, then that's what the United States is going to do with their foreign policy. They're going to withdraw from the Middle East, and they're going to create peace and stability by defanging Iran and defanging Israel. And the way he explains it makes sense, but nobody else talks about those two powerful entities. It's scary. It's like I feel like I'm in the Matrix, George. I need your help.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me, and I don't believe it for a second. And I'll have to look deeper into who this fellow is and report back to you. How about that? I'll study what you've said, or what you've said he said, and I'll come back to you at the next available opportunity, Frank. But I've got to give a big shout out to more of tonight's top Moats supporters who've been backing the program on the moats.tv website. Luis Filio, Thomas Kala, Syed Ahmad, Eddie Lamb, and Elizabeth Marchant. Thank you, every one of you, for your generosity, and thanks in advance for those who are going to follow them by, at the end of the show, go to moats.tv and do the necessary. Some comments from Brendan Murray. Why did Italy and Germany veto sanctions against Israel? And DM says the crime of the Congo is a 1909 book by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle about human rights abuses in the Congo Free State. Charlotte Burns, 7143, says gazillions of people, cars, buildings, planes, boats, trains, farmers and plastics depend on fossil fuels. How long will it be before oil and gas run out? I think we're in more trouble than I realize, says Charlotte and me. And Ragdb says, Dear George, Trump's NSA is Rubio. Tulsi is supposedly the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. She's out of the picture. Chaos rules. And insider trading, of course. And Ian McKillop, 1774, says, how is Iran supposed to kill children 9,000 miles away? Indeed so. Here's a legend on the line. It's Terence in Reading. He thinks the West is lying. Go ahead, Tal.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway, and the cameo appearance by your wife was pretty interesting earlier as you run across the stage there. Sign me up for the next Flotilla, and kind regards to Fra and everyone on it. The next time, sign me up, I'll be there. Regarding the West, for me, I can see just truth coming from Persia, loud and clear, and Operation Underpants up, Operation Underpants down by Trump is getting nowhere. I think the end product there is going to be that he'll stand down, but before he stands down, he'll give Assad the clearance by clearing Maxwell, the Maxwell Zionist family, who should have been hauled in a long time ago. And I think, I'd like your opinion on that, but I think the glaring truth for me is the Holy Sister in Jerusalem with a black eye and beaten up, the fag in the mouth. We pray for these people in the year of in the month of the Rosary, obviously. And thank God for Persia, and thank God for the Muslims in Persia that are standing by a single word, truth. What say you, Mr. Galloway?
Well, that was very beautifully expressed, Terence, I must say. The pardoning of Ghislaine Maxwell is only a matter of time. After all, it's the view of the man with the auto pen that there was no sex trafficking. It's the view of Kash Patel. He said so in front of a congressional committee. So if there was no sex trafficking to anybody, how can Ghislaine Maxwell be guilty of sex trafficking? Trafficking to whom? If there was no one being trafficked to, then there was no trafficking. So I feel sure that they're going to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell because they want to shut her mouth. And every day that she spends, even in a very soft, open prison with a comfort dog that's been given to her, is a day that she might blow the gaff on all of them. And she knows where all the bodies are buried, perhaps literally buried. She knows everything that happened, and she knows who was involved in it. I do think he is going to stand down. I'm 100% sure Donald Trump will not serve the whole of this presidential term. He might get impeached, he might get removed, he might have a heart attack, he might voluntarily decide that he needs to give Vance an opportunity to have a run. But I very much doubt that he will stay the whole term, not least because he can't pardon himself. He needs another president to pardon him and to pardon his rotten crime family. And J.D. Vance, that would be the price of the handover. So very well, points very well made, Terence, and we'll watch this space. Now, here comes the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
So Israel spends $750 million into their PR budget, even though, and I'm quoting the Times of Israel, it won't work. Now, they're not the only one desperate trying to revive their reputational crisis. NATO is another one, because it turns out that last week they were having meetings with TV and filmmakers. These were intimate and behind-door meetings across Europe and the United States. LA, Paris, Brussels, and London next. Now, some in the Writers Guild of Great Britain have already expressed unhappiness about this, that they're being fed NATO propaganda that they are supposed to reflect in their artistic work. But it comes on the back of a report that was released just 2 months ago from the, let me double check, from the Center for European Reform. And it was titled, How to Build Public Support for Defense Spending in Europe. And of course, what they mean with defense is pouring money into Zelensky's pockets and letting the Ukrainians die for us. And this is, the report says that Europe is facing a triple threat. First, Russia's ambitious imperialist ambitions, imagine. Second, China's economic coercion. And third, the withdrawal of US commitment into supporting Europe's defense. So, having to deal with these triple threats, Europe has to spend money, and they think that using the artistic route of filmmakers is the best way. This is not the first time that NATO has made such meetings. In 2024, screenwriters, very prominent screenwriters, met as well, had a public meeting at the NATO HQ in Brussels, where they discussed security policy. And these screenwriters included those from Friends and Law and Order. Friends, by the way, on this day had aired their last episode in 2004. That's how long ago Friends was. And that last episode was watched by 52 million people worldwide. So, I mean, these were big screenwriters they were talking about. Anyway, I'm not saying anything new. We know that they don't even need these meetings, right? But they're, at this moment, NATO and Israel, for that matter, are quite desperate, because what's happening in Iran right now, they're producing, for a fraction of their budget, they're producing Hollywood clips that everyone is looking forward to through the use of Lego.
It's amazing what the Iranians have done on virtually zero budget and with not single famous screenwriter on board.
Exactly.
It just goes to show that it's the message that counts. You can sell a pig in a pretty poke, but only once, because once the customer gets it home and discovers that in that pretty poke is merely a pig, and moreover, a pig increasingly without lipstick.
Yeah.
You're not going to buy it twice. And so these screenwriters will be well advised to give these ghouls a wide berth.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many triggers in what you said there. To me, I'm in danger of talking too long, but first of all, anything that's called a centre is worth avoiding because they're never a centre. They are. There's certain restrictions on what you can call yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't call yourself an institute unless you meet certain criteria, but you can call yourself a centre even if you are the sum total of that centre. Anything that is promising reform, see, I'm so old, when reforms used to be talked about, it was a good thing. Reforms, yeah, let's have some reforms. Now, any centre looking for reforms, especially in Europe, it's going to be something bad. They want to take something that you've already got away from you. They want to force you to allow someone who wants to exploit or oppress you to do so. That's the kind of reforms these centres are all about. And of course, entirely circular. They get funded by the very people who will benefit from any of the reforms that they manage to persuade you of the righteousness of. And then there's the issue of, what was it you called it? Coercion. Chinese
economic coercion.
Who are the Chinese coercing? What's that meant to be? Are they forcing people to buy Chinese cars? Well, I'll tell you what, if I had the money, I'd buy a different Chinese car every day, because when you get a taxi here in Moscow, it's almost always a top-of-the-range Chinese car, a middle-range price. Just so happens I don't actually have the price of one.
In other parts of the world, they would just call it capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, what do they mean by Chinese economic coercion? People are buying Chinese things because they're at a quality and a price and a delivery time that suits them. Where's the coercion in that? Didn't these people, as you say, didn't these people used to believe in free markets? Why can't I buy a Zeekr in Britain? Best car I've ever been in. It's like a Rolls Royce at $40,000. A Zeekr, Z-E-K-E-R.
Yeah.
But if you're watching in Britain, you can't buy it
No.
there. And there are heavy duty restrictions in many European countries against buying a Chinese vehicle. The coercion is not from China. The coercion is from those who claimed that they believed in capitalism and cannot bear the fact that Chinese capitalism is better than their capitalism. Maybe this will all be sorted out when Trump goes to Beijing.
Finally.
You think the Chinese people are waiting anxiously for a visit from the Don? Don Zhu.
Don Zhu. They have their own Donald Trump, you know that? He's very famous online.
He's very, very famous. He's very, very good. No, Don Zhu, his best saying was, if you don't know what you're doing, your enemy definitely won't know what you're doing. And I thought that summed him up.
Exactly.
Thanks for that, Gayatri. We've run out of time. We have to hightail it out of here. So let me close the show almost exactly on time and invite you back again on Sunday for the original, for the mothership edition of the Mother of All Talk Shows. I talked at the beginning of the record audience that we had on the last two shows. Let's see if we can break it. Why don't we? Maybe it's only when the war's raging that the biggest audiences come in which case let's hope we don't have a big audience on Sunday. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.